All right. Greetings, barbecue family. Welcome to another live episode of the Backyard SmokeMaster BBQ Podcast. I'm your host, Kenyatta Robinson. This is episode number 76, and I'm so glad that you have taken some time out to join us live. However, if you are catching us on a replay, that's cool too. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and even better, take a moment to leave us a review on whatever podcast player that you might be listening to us on the replay. But for those of you who are tuning in live, definitely do appreciate you all for hanging out in what I think is the best hour of the week, or at least it's my favorite hour of the week because I get to spend this time talking to you all. Now, last week we had a very special episode. In case you didn't catch us or haven't seen it yet, we had Barbecue Hall of Famer Meathead joined us, and basically, he broke down a whole lot of barbecue myths. Some of them I had never heard before or thought of before. And I thought, kind of building on that, and, he dropped so many gems and dimes. I thought it would be a good idea this week to kind of revisit some of those things that he talked about and really maybe dive into a couple of them a little deeper. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to get into some barbecue myths, that you may not have heard of or have not thought of, or things that you think are true, but you really don't. And what I really appreciated about Meathead's approach is that it comes from a very scientific, tried and tested and proven approach. He's not just kind of pulling things out of the sky. I mean, this is someone that has been barbecuing for years, decades, and educating, those of us who want to level up our barbecue game. So he's definitely a true expert in this field. So we're going to get into that. And then, of course, always want to invite you all, if you like these types of barbecue discussions, I do have a membership community, and I'd love for you to take a moment to check us out. Go to backyardsmokemaster.com / society. Check us out, the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, for deeper barbecue discussions. And I know that I've got at least one member of the society who is already here in the comments. So let's jump into the comments before we get too deep and see who we've got with us today. So let's say hello. Bruce, correctional officer for lockdown, says, "Good evening, everyone. Always great to listen to my favorite podcast, Jam, while waiting for another great show." Thank you, Bruce. Always appreciate your participation, your presence. Believe me, it does not go unnoticed. Hello to Mike. He says, "Good evening to my fellow barbecue brethren." All right, so I thank you both and encourage, all of you to please go ahead, jump into those comments. As I say every week, your comments and live participation are really the engine that drives this show. All right, so let's jump right into this. And I've got a bunch of them that I pulled out. All right, so first segment, we're going to talk about the truth about smoke. So here's the myth. Soaking wood chips enhances smoke. And, as we go through this, jump in those comments and let me know if you believe this, if you disagree, if maybe you've got another thought, question, any of that. All of your feedback and comments and thoughts are welcome. So the truth is, soaked wood produces steam. So it does not produce flavorful smoke. Okay, so I know one thing I've always heard when it comes to those little thin wood chips that you can pick up at your hardware store. A lot of times, they say, soak them in water before you put them on your fire. So no. Matter of fact, I would say don't even bother with the little wood chips. If you want to get some wood flavor, get wood chunks, not the little thin wood chips. Soaking them in water is not going to make a difference. It's only going to produce steam. It's not going to give you the flavor you're looking for. And I think that the little thin wood chips, they disintegrate in a matter of seconds. So I think don't even bother with the wood chips. Just go straight for the wood chunks. Next, is all smoke good smoke? We see it. You get your smoke, you get your fire going, and you're eager, you're excited to get your barbecue, get the meat on. You want to get this thing going, get the show on the road. But maybe at the beginning, you're seeing smoke that is, dark gray or maybe brown in color. So you're getting smoke, and it might be billowing, and you're getting a lot of smoke, and that looks really impressive. You take pictures, it looks great for the gram and all of that stuff. But is that smoke really the smoke that's going to enhance the flavor of your food? The truth is, thin blue smoke is best. So ideally what you want to do is you want to give that smoke, give that wood that you've added to your fire, give it time. You want clean combustion from the yellow flame. That's how Meathead defined it, from the yellow flame. And blue smoke, which is, a lot of times like an invisible smoke. It's very thin. You can barely detect it. That's the best. It's going to be clean. It's not going to impart like a foul, bitter smoke flavor onto your food. It's going to give you the type of smoke flavor that you're looking for. And remember, smoke treated, it's like another ingredient. Smoke attaches best to your meat when it's cold, early on in the cook. That's really when your meat is going to take on the most smoke flavor. So it's important that you be patient and allow that smoke to be a clean smoke. So again, you're looking for thin blue, really thin, barely detectable smoke that's really the best. That's what you're looking for. The tip, use dry wood chunks for better control and flavor. Next up, we're going to get into the charcoal versus gas debate. But let me get back into the comments before we kind of switch gears into that one and see what you guys had to say. So let me get in there. Hello to Donald Perry. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you. Correctional officer says, Meathead really enlightened me about smoking wood chips. Yes. And Meathead stated that white smoke for a short cook of burgers, hot dogs, isn't too bad. That was interesting for me to learn. So yeah, your short cooks are going to be, they're quick cooks. So it's more like you're cooking, more like grilling, a short cook, doing hot dogs, burgers. So that's not really, maybe not necessarily smoking, because you're doing grilling. That's usually more of a direct heat type of a cook. High temperatures, maybe 350 degrees and up. So those are going to be very fast, short cooks. Your meat's not going to be absorbing a whole lot of smoke flavor anyway. It's going to be cooking fast, And in those cases, yeah, white smoke is going to be okay. You just don't want to put your food on. If you can look at that smoke and see it's really thick and it just looks dirty, you don't want to, again, smoke is like an ingredient. So if it looks dirty, you don't want to put a dirty ingredient onto your food. All right, let's get back into it. Okay, so next up, the charcoal versus gas debate. And I found this one to be really interesting, and I'm just going to say right off the top, and if you've been watching the podcast, I've been encouraging folks to step away from gas grills because, in my view, cooking with the gas grills, almost like cooking the same type of cooking that you're doing inside your house, inside your oven, just that you're outside. So I wasn't really seeing the benefit of cooking with a gas grill, but meat had enlightened all of us, I think, including me, that there are certain types of gas grills. That do impart good flavor. So there's like an exception to the rule. So it's not that all gas grills are useless, which was kind of like the thing that I was saying. So the truth is, it's not really about charcoal versus gas. It's more about infrared heat and wood, which I thought was pretty interesting. Now, what does that really mean? I had to do a little more, research on that because I heard the words, but didn't necessarily understand it all. Okay, so basically, infrared heat is one of three different types of heat transfer that's used in cooking. So let me break down the three. There's conduction, which is direct contact, or think of it like direct heat, or like what we just talked about with when you're doing your hot dogs, you're doing your burgers, if you're doing a steak on a hot griddle. So that's more like a conduction heat. Then a second type of heat is convection. So convection is hot air circulation, and that's basically what you get inside of the oven in your house. And then a third type is infrared radiation. So this is radiant heat energy. And in a gas grill, make sure your gas grill has infrared burners. And what I learned is that these infrared burners are basically, it's the same type of heat that you get off of coals, off of your charcoal. Your charcoal glowing hot, when it's hot, glowing hot charcoal produces infrared heat, and that can be replicated in a gas grill. And then you might ask, okay, but what about the smoke component? And again, I think for me, this is where it's a little bit different. But remember, charcoal does not produce smoke flavor. I mean, you might see some smoke, but that's not the smoke flavor that we're talking about that's going to get into your meat. Again, basically, charcoal is for heat, and then wood is for smoke flavor. So that there's the distinction there. So again, infrared radiation can produce the same type of heat that you get from your coal. So infrared heat doesn't rely on air to transfer heat. Instead, it relates directly to a hot surface, like similar to red hot coals, glowing metal, or ceramic plates to the food. And the heat that it's providing to the food is fast, intense, and focused. So why is infrared heat great for barbecue? Direct heat grilling. with coals, infrared burners on your gas grill. It gives you a superior searing power. So infrared heat delivers high concentrated energy directly to the heat of your food. So this is exactly what you want to create, the Maillard reaction. And we hear folks like Meathead talking about that a lot, which is the chemical process that forms that deep, flavorful crust on steak, ribs, and other grilled meat. So Meathead pointed out that infrared heat is why steakhouse steaks taste so good, and most of your high-end steakhouses are actually using gas grills with powerful infrared burners to give you that outstanding steak that they're going to charge you $150 for. All right. And then infrared heat, another benefit is that it gives you more even browning. And he talked about this as well. So unlike hot metal grill grates, which just create grill marks, infrared heat browns the entire surface. So this means more flavorful crust, not just lines. And we heard Meathead talk about how he would much rather have a steak that has been browned all over, seared all over, and not just, those visible deep sear mark lines that, we've been kind of taught to strive for when, you're doing like a sear on a steak, and then the experts will tell you to turn it a quarter, maybe wait 30 seconds and then turn that meat a quarter. And then that will help you produce those deep sear marks. So that's really not what we should be looking for. So we need to be deprogrammed out of that way of thinking. And then a third benefit of infrared cooking is that the infrared cooks food faster because it doesn't waste energy heating the air around it. It radiates the heat directly into the meat, and this makes it ideal for foods like steaks, burgers, gives you, like with fish, for a crisp skin, and reverse sear finishing. And then finally, infrared gives you better control if you have the right gear. So while charcoal naturally produces infrared radiation when glowing hot, many infrared gas grills now come with ceramic or metal infrared emitters that give you searing temperatures up to 900 degrees or more. So the bottom line, infrared heat isn't a gimmick. It's a powerful, efficient, and flavorful way to cook meat. Whether it's glowing charcoal or a dedicated infrared burner, you want to have an infrared, some type of infrared cooking within your barbecue toolkit, especially when it comes time to searing or finishing. All right, so I mean, that was a lot, and that was a lot to consider, but that definitely gives me an entirely new and different way to think about gas grills. So I'm still not sad that I got rid of my, I had a Weber gas grill that I bought, probably about 10 years ago, because I know it didn't have those infrared burners. So I think that's probably a benefit in technology that we're probably getting on your newer gas grills. I'm not really, I have to admit, I haven't really been paying attention to gas grills over the last 5-6 years. But if you go that route, and again, we're trying to figure out how to make barbecuing easier, more convenient. I think that's part of the reason why we see, pellet grills so popular. Gas grills, based on, the science and what Meathead has taught us, is not something that's like a throwaway. Gas grills with infrared burners can have a place in your barbecue arsenal. All right, so that's some good nuggets to take with you. All right, before we get to this one, let me go back into the comments, see what you guys are are talking about. Let's see. All right, correctional officer said he enjoyed Meathead giving insight into searing rather than those tiger stripes. That's a good way to put those to describe those grill marks that we get on the steaks. Surfing on Mars. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Always appreciate you. All right. So let's get back into it. Let's see, where did we leave off? All right, next we're going to talk about some cooking techniques that need rethinking. All right, so let's see what we got. The myth here is sear your meat first. The truth is, reverse searing delivers better crust and interior. So in other words, you're doing that steak, smoke it first, and then do your reverse sear at the end. And again, we're not just talking about doing a sear where we're just getting tiger marks, as a correctional officer called it. We're not just going for those grill marks. We want to get a sear across the entire surface of our steak. That's going to give us a better tasting steak. All right. Next up, should you only be flipping your steak once? That's kind of a common one that we hear, when they're telling us to do these reverse sears, flip it, do the other side. So the truth is, frequent flipping will give us more even cooking than just flipping it once. So again, this is another one of those myths or things that we've been taught that we need to rethink. All right. You need a binder like mustard for rubs to stick. All right. So this is, we see these videos on YouTube and, they're always, most everyone we see is using some type of a binder, on their food. I'm guilty of this as well. And the debate then becomes, what's the best binder, or does it make a difference? Is it mustard? Is it Worcestershire sauce? Or is it, maybe apple cider vinegar or water or something else? I was mistaken. I was thinking that Meathead had recommended using mayonnaise as a binder. So I've got some videos out there where I'm talking about using mayo. So now I've learned it's not necessary. So water works just fine. And, these other condiments like mustard, the flavor is not going to come through anyway. And I already knew that. Even when I do put mustard on my ribs at the beginning, I would, argue with anyone who tries to say, that they are able to get a noticeable difference, using something like mustard or anything else as the binder, that it's going to somehow enhance and improve, the flavor of the food that they were cooking. Totally false. Totally false. All right, let me see what you guys are talking about in the comments. So let me see what you guys are saying here. There's something in here that I saw kind of was funny. All right, Surfing on Mars said, with regard, I think, to the discussion on the charcoal and gas, he says, if you're not lugging heavy bags of dirty charcoal and getting your fingernails filthy with the charcoal and dropping a bag on your foot and getting the fire too hot or too low, you're cheating. Wow, okay. So no pain, no gain. All right, sorry, I was trying to see if I could resize this to get the full comment in. This is where you go wrong trying to make changes on the fly. So now I just screwed that up. All right, I'll try and fix that as we go. I just made it worse. Anyway, no, I like that. Yeah, no pain, no gain, basically. And Serping on Mars says, only by suffering can you achieve barbecue perfection. All right, let me see if I can get that fixed. All right, that looks a little better. All right, this is how you know you're watching a live podcast, because I'm not afraid to show you guys myself messing up on the fly. All right, let's get back into it. So next up, so we just talked about some techniques that we need to relearn. So let's talk about brisket, bark, and fat. And of course, we all consider brisket to be kind of like the Super Bowl of barbecue when you take on that brisket, because it's going to be probably a 12-hour cook, maybe longer. And that's just with the brisket, on the smoker. That doesn't include the prep time. And then after you've, also when you decide if you're going to wrap it, if you're going to use butcher paper or aluminum foil, and you get it up to at least 203 degrees. So that's going to take you half a day. And then you have to rest it. And then, I'm learning that the longer you can rest it and, keep that brisket in a food safe temperature. So basically kind of like resting, but allowing it to cool off at a very slow pace. And that can take at least 4 hours. And some guys are letting it go 6, maybe 12, putting it in the oven inside their house at the lowest temperature, or maybe buying a food warmer, which is what will probably be one of my next acquisitions in order to really achieve, the most tender, flavorful brisket that you can. Really, the resting is going to allow it to get even more tender and allow those juices to settle down. But I digress, getting carried away talking about brisket. Okay, the myth here is that fat penetrates the meat during the cooking. And, I asked Meathead this question because just that same day I was on one of these barbecue forums on Facebook, and I saw someone posting about how, and they were bragging about how they do not trim the brisket at all. They just take it right out of the packaging and put it onto the smoker, which I just found astonishing. And then even more astonishing to me is then when I was reading the comments, I was shocked that there were a whole lot of people high-fiving this guy, for not trimming the fat at all, which is just incredible to me. So I had to get Meathead's thought on that. And, he validated my view. The truth is that fat can't penetrate muscle. So leaving a big fat, super thick hunk of fat on that brisket, it's never going to render down. And it is not going, that fat, you're slow cooking, it is not going to penetrate the meat and give it good flavor. Instead, what you're looking for, and this is on the opposite side of the super fatty side, on the opposite side, the meat side, what you really want, and this is why getting a prime or a choice brisket is, or Wagyu, is optimal, because really what's going to penetrate and give you some additional flavor are those thin marbling, those thin strides of thin stripes of fat that you see, which is basically called the marbling. I mean, and that's thin enough. That is going to be absorbed into the meat and give it flavor, but not those big, thick, hunks of fat. So you do need to, on the fat side, try and trim that brisket down and leave about a quarter inch. But just being lazy and not trimming it at all is not going to get you anywhere. All right. So yeah, don't trim fat off brisket. That's the myth. The truth is, again, excess fat prevents the rub from seasoning the meat. So that's another point, is that on that side that you're not trimming down and then you're putting all that rub on it, that rub is never going to meet. It's never going to reach the surface of the meat on that thick fat side. So you're just wasting your rub. And I think it's going to take even longer for your brisket to cook. It's already a long cook. I think you're just making it even longer by not doing that. And then this was cool. A bonus tip that Meathead provided is to separate the point and the flat to have even more even brisket results. So basically, the point is the, it's really that uneven, much thicker, part of the brisket when you buy a whole packer brisket, whereas, the flat is the skinnier, the flat point. I guess that's why they call it the flat. They're not going to cook at the same pace if you leave them connected, but Meathead is suggesting that you'll be able to cook them more evenly by separating them. And I know that's really counter to a lot of the videos, that we see on YouTube, because usually you see the guy smoking them completely whole, and I've been doing this too. I don't know that I have ever separated the point from the flat at the onset of cooking, before I even put the brisket onto the smoker. But I'm going to try it. Got to try it and see how that turns out. Okay. Correctional officer for lockdown says, I like the philosophy of Rodney Scott when it comes to starting a cook. He believes it's best to always be in a positive, happy mood while starting a cook. And then Surfing on Mars says, if you're not smiling when barbecue, if you're not I think maybe he's saying if you're not smiling when barbecuing, when are you smiling? Okay, I got it. Yeah, I truly believe this as well. Your attitude and it's supposed to be fun, right? I mean, you're outside, you're probably in your backyard at your house, and you've dedicated some time to this. This is what you love to do, and you can't wait to see how this food is going to turn out. You're excited to see, who the folks you're cooking for, how they receive the food that you're preparing, that you're working so hard on. If you're a guy that's watching, a barbecue podcast like this one, you really care. You care about how your barbecue is going to turn out, and you're trying to pick up as much information and as many tidbits as you can to become a better pit master. So you really care, and you need to be enjoying it. This is something that you should be enjoying, having fun. I keep saying that this is a fantastic time to be someone who wants to barbecue because we have so many choices out there. Whereas in so many other industries, we're seeing, shrinking of choices of companies and things like that. But barbecue, grills, and smokers, this is an area where there's just a whole lot of competition, a whole lot of choices available for us. And then most of the popular grills and smokers, or even the ones that may be more of a niche, maybe made by a smaller fabricator, smaller company, they're producing a lot of cool accessories and add-ons and things like that you can also pick up to make the process even better. Okay, so absolutely, have a smile on your face, have a good cold drink by your side, some good sounds, good tunes, out there in your yard, and enjoy yourself and enjoy the process. So absolutely, and I think that will also come across in the food that you're preparing. Absolutely. Correctional officer says, I like Meathead making sure to emphasize using thermometers. Yes, absolutely. That's another, in this day and age, 2025, we've got instant read leave-in thermometers. I keep saying, when you get that, if you get your first barbecue grill or smoker, the first thing you should buy as an add-on or like an accessory, I think, is a good instant read thermometer. And you can pick one up on Amazon, between 10 and 15 bucks, and it'll give you a reading, within a second and a half, instant. And now, of course, we're seeing wireless thermometers. They're getting even better and more reliable as well. So absolutely no reason, to not have a thermometer. It will give you more information because, again, what you want to be doing is making sure that you're cooking food to food safe temperatures. You want to keep everyone who's consuming your barbecue safe. So you don't want to undercook your meat, and there's no reason to be guessing. Or if you're doing a steak, to a certain doneness, medium rare or well done or medium whatever, you can get your thermometer will help you know exactly where that steak is. So there's absolutely no need to just be looking at the food and guessing or just trying to estimate based on the amount of time. So don't need to be doing that at all. Hello to Noinks. Good to see you. He says he loves this topic. I appreciate you for tuning in. And yeah, I think this is another great topic because there's just so much that we have learned over the years in terms of what we should be doing in terms of barbecue that I think we do need to reconsider and relearn. Absolutely. Surfing on Mars says, let's see, for thermometers, instant read, he says the Thermapen is hands down the best. And for wireless, he gives another endorsement to the ThermaWorks RFX. He says the other wireless thermometers are trash. All right, that's a pretty strong statement. I have tried a lot of the wireless thermometers. I'll co-sign first on the instant read Thermapen. I mean, that's pretty much like the gold standard of instant read thermometers. I would also say, and Meathead mentioned it as well, the Fireboard's Spark thermometer. I have that up just as high as a Thermapen because I love the big digital readout screen, and I love the fact that the Fireboard Spark can talk to your phone, the Fireboard app. And then also it can also talk to if you've gotten other Fireboard products, like even the Fireboard 2, which is like a leave-in wired thermometer. You can actually use your Fireboard Spark kind of like as a digital remote reader, and it'll give you the temperature on the wired probe that you've left in. If you're using the Fireboard 2, you can see the temperature on your Fireboard Spark. So I give a high endorsement to the Spark as well. And then in the wireless arena, right now, my favorite wireless is the ThermoWorks RFX. And then a close second for me is the Fireboard Pulse. I think you can't go wrong with either one of those. Combustion, is it combustion? Oh, now I'm kind of blanking. I think it's called combustion. It starts with a C, and their products are yellow. It's another wireless thermometer that is pretty good as well. Just trying to see if I'm getting that name right. Yeah, okay. It is the combustion. I actually have it. And let me, since I brought it up, see if I can bring it up. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, the combustion wireless thermometer. So that's another pretty good one as well. It came out maybe a year or so before the ThermoWorks RFX and the Fireboard Pulse. So I was enjoying using the combustion, but I have to admit, now that I have the RFX and the Pulse, I'm not really using the combustion as much. But yeah. Then there are some others that have been in the arena for wireless thermometers longer, and we've talked about them on this podcast many times, so I'm not going to name them. But kind of like the one that if you go to the hardware store, you'll probably see, and they were kind of like the first to really push out wireless thermometers. I would say there are better choices. There are better choices than that one. All right, let's get back into this, because now we've got some bonus myth busters that we're going to get into. So Meathead brought this one up, and I had already come to this conclusion myself, but the myth is that beer can chicken adds flavor. So what do you guys think? I mean, I think for a lot of us, when we were getting into barbecue, at least the fad or the hot trend maybe 5-6 years ago was all about, using a beer and sitting your chicken on top of a beer can with beer in it that you added some barbecue rub to, and that was going to give you a moist chicken. So that's the myth. So beer in the can doesn't produce steam. It just looks cool, to have your chicken sitting on there looking impressive. And correctional officer yelled, "It's a myth." And he is absolutely correct. So I hope that you all, at this point, leave the beer can chicken fad behind. It's not what it's cracked up to be. And actually all it's going to do is, it's going to actually cause your chicken on the inside to cook. It'll slow down the cooking and kind of cook it at a different pace, than the outside of your chicken and poultry. That's nothing that you want to fool with in terms of, making sure you're cooking it to food safe temperature. So leave the beer can chicken in the past. Now here's a good one. Does spritzing add any flavor to your meat? And we see this a lot in YouTube videos where guys are spritzing at some point during the process. And I'm one that has been doing this too. Although my favorite thing to spritz with is actually water. Sometimes I'll use apple cider vinegar, but I'm not one of those guys that will use like apple juice or, try and get exotic with other things. So yeah, no, I'm not an advocate for spritzing for that reason. So spritzing mostly cools the meat and softens the bark. Okay, and then there are some reasons, why you may want to spritz. Okay, so meatheads' take on this was that and it's rooted in solid food science. So basically, spritzing meat during the cook primarily, again, cools the surface. And the main reason that you might want to do it is that it will help slow down the cooking process. So it's not completely, useless. Like it may not be adding any flavor, but, when you want to slow down the cook, if you think that your meat is cooking too fast and you're worrying about the bark burning or the internal temperature getting ahead of schedule, then spritzing, a spritz can be a good way to cool the surface slightly and buy you some time. So think of it as like tapping the brakes on your cook. So that's really the main reason why you may want to, utilize the spritzing technique. Now, enhancing, again, the question is, does it, another benefit that you may realize is that spritzing may help enhance the smoke adherence early on. So in the first couple of hours of a low and slow cook, a light spritz may attract more smoke particles because moisture on the surface can improve smoke adhesion. But this works best before the bark has started to form. Once the bark starts forming, moisture is mainly just going to break it down and make it softer. Okay. And then in terms of whether or not it adds any flavor, it can add a little flavor, just barely. Okay. So, apple juice or other liquids don't deeply flavor the meat. Some cooks like a hint of surface flavor or color from a diluted sauce or maybe like a cider vinegar or a bourbon mix, but don't expect a big major flavor change from doing it. So it's really more about a subtle surface effect. And then if you're cooking something like chicken, pork chops, or sausage and want to keep it visually moist, so, this is strictly for the visual look. And, you're trying to maybe take some pictures, for your gram or whatever, maybe adding some moisture then, when it's coming right off the grill, spritz can help with the sheen. So again, think of this as like your Instagram ready meat. Now, let's talk about when spritzing is a bad idea. So again, once your bark is set, spritzing softens it, especially on ribs or brisket. On hot and fast cooked, spritzing may not have time to evaporate cleanly, and it can interfere with the crust formation. And then if you're using a pellet grill or a low smoke fire, spritzing often just slows down the cooking without providing any smoke benefit. So if you do spritz, use a fine mist, not a steam. Use a clean food grade spray bottle, not one that you grab from under the sink. Water, again, is usually enough. Apple juice, vinegar, or bourbon-based mixes, Again, these might be nice, but they don't really penetrate and mostly just smell good for the cook. Yeah, but they're not really adding any real flavor, any detectable flavor. So, bottom line, spritz with purpose, not just out of habit. If your goal is for a good bark, crust, or faster cooking, then skip it. If your goal is for smoke adhesion early on or managing cook time, then it can be a useful tool. All right. So that's a lot of good tips and different ways, to think about spritzing. Now let me see what you guys are saying. All right. Now, correctional officer says beer can chicken is also a waste of good beer as well. And then when it comes to spritzing, he says that he's guilty of spritzing, but Meathead has given him new perspective. To spritz or not to spritz? That is the question. That is exactly the question. So don't just go into your cook like out of force of habit or just assuming that at a certain time that you just absolutely have to spritz. We don't want to be, looking because, when you're peeking, what's the saying? If you're looking, you ain't cooking, or if you're peeking, you ain't cooking. Something like that. You know what I'm talking about. You've heard it. But you don't want to be, looking at it too often. But when you do take that time to check and see how your meat is progressing, your decisions on whether or not to spritz should really be more on, is it cooking too fast? Is the internal temperature, way higher than what you wanted it to be? Do I need to slow this cook down? I think those are really the questions that should determine, whether or not you're going to spritz. So I agree. To spritz or not to spritz, that is the question. Let's see. Surfing on Mars says, just don't do what I did in Germany and confuse spritzing with schwitzing. Hope I'm saying that right, which means pissing or vice versa. My German is rusty. All right. Wait, okay, no. He says he just confused the words. Did not actually schwitz on the barbecue. I sure hope not. And boy, see, here's where I'm guilty. I'm just kind of like, going with the comments, and yeah, almost went down a weird rabbit hole there. So okay, let's move on. Correctional officer says Meathead gave an interesting view on mesquite wood chunks. He stated that they are to be used carefully. Yeah, and I've said this on many occasions. I think if you do cook with mesquite, yeah, you should use it sparingly and carefully. Definitely, you don't want to go crazy with the mesquite because it's super powerful and it can overpower your meat if you're using too much of it. And me personally, I gave up cooking with mesquite years ago. I ruined some food early on, and that was the only experience that I needed, with mesquite, to convince me that that's not the way to go. Okay, let me see. I think we've got a couple more. Let's see. Okay, grill marks equal flavor. All right, so we've talked about this. So I think you guys, if you've been tuning in, I think you already know the answer to this one. So again, having crust across the entire surface is going to equal better taste. So grill marks, it does not give you consummate flavor. Definitely not. Looks good for the gram, but go for a crust across the entire surface. Cook meat to time per pound. And so like in this one, I've heard a lot that, like with a brisket, you can expect a brisket to cook like 1 hour for every pound of your brisket. I've heard that, that myth. Okay. But we're learning, that, all of these myths or these, kind of principles that we've been hearing about for years aren't necessarily true and accurate. So thickness and internal temperature are much more important than just assuming that your food is going to cook within a certain number of hours. And again, we've talked about how, having good thermometers can also aid in this process. So don't just assume, a lot of times I get that question, hey, you cooked ribs. How long did it take? Or, how long do you need to have your ribs on the smoker? Or brisket, how long, people want like exact, precise time estimates. Or, here's the one that I really hate when my wife does is, when will it be ready? I get that question. I feel like I've done a little better at, kind of gently scolding her that, hey, Mo, I cannot just give you an exact time for when this meat is going to be ready. It's ready when it's ready, and it's based on temperature, not on time. So, yeah. So again, that's important. Definitely, don't succumb to that pressure of committing to having something done within a certain time frame, because that's not the way. All right. Let me see what you guys are saying here. Okay, Noink said, when I got serious about barbecue, I became a charcoal snob and turned my nose up at Kingsford. I still don't use Kingsford, but it does serve a purpose and can make good barbecue. Absolutely, I agree. I agree with that. I think what I like is that we have a lot of choices. When I was growing up, all I remember seeing my dad with was Kingsford. I don't even know if the other brands that, like Royal Oak or any of them were around back then. I don't know. All I ever saw was Kingsford. That's it. But yeah, when I got into barbecue and started paying attention and was happy to see that we do have a lot of choices. There's some really good ones out there, but they all serve, especially, charcoal, again, it's for heat, and all of them will get hot. And I do mean all of them. So all of them will meet, their core purpose, which is to provide heat for your cook. And yeah, I still use Kingsford as well as others, just because, I like to try different stuff. I'm a big fan. I like Royal Oak, because it's usually the cheapest and it gets the job done. I love Kingsford as well. I love getting Kingsford on sale, like especially now, summertime, around the major, so-called barbecue holidays like Memorial Day, 4th of July, which is coming up, Labor Day. Usually you can find pretty good sales on Kingsford. So that's a great time to stock up. You can get it pretty cheap. But then I'm a big fan of B&B as well. So yeah, lots of great choices out there. Correctional officer says, I have started using eye goggles for when I open my grill. My eyes are less irritated by the smoke. I haven't heard that one, but that makes sense. You open your grill, sometimes, yeah, you get that rush of smoke coming right to your face. I usually turn my head to the side because I know it's coming. But no, that's a good tip that maybe some of you might want to take on. Donald says, grill marks is for presentation, in my opinion. Totally agree. especially after hearing, Meathead break it down. To me, yeah, those grill marks, that's just for the gram. Let's see. Okay. Surfing on Mars said to Noinks, you gotta try Japanese Benkotan. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. Charcoal, but yeah, I've heard of it too. It's very expensive, but super quality. He has 10 boxes he bought years ago. Come to LA and I will cook some teriyaki for you. Okay. Well, I hope that invitation is good for all of us. Man. Um, and I'm in LA at least once a year, maybe twice. I'm gonna be there at the end of August. Anyway, just putting that out there. But I'm curious, where can you get Japanese Benkotan? Is that something that we can get? Do we have to be in Japan in order to get it? I've never tried to buy it, so I'm curious. Is there a way to get it, stateside here in the States? So hold on, let me get my screen back up. Okay. And see what my friend Google says. Okay, now wait a minute. I do see, what is this from Home Depot? Oh, the site can't be reached. Okay, I don't know. Maybe that's weird. The Benko Grill. Ooh. $130, not including shipping. That's for, choose 22 pounds or 11 pounds. Okay, the 22 pound is $130. 11 pounds is $78. That's pretty interesting. I don't know that I'm going to try that, but man, I would love to see what it's all about. Anybody out there watching has a hookup, or maybe there's a sponsor. If you want to send me some of this Benkotan charcoal, get at me. I would love to try it. Love to try specialty. Good specialty stuff. So that sounds pretty interesting. But yeah, it does sound like it's pretty pricey to get it. All right, correctional officer says that he's back to using Kingsford after listening to Meathead provide some valuable insight about lump charcoal. Feel I can benefit from Kingsford. That's another good, a good point. And we didn't talk about this as well, but that was something else that was enlightening to me was, when Meathead basically said that he prefers charcoal briquettes over lump charcoal, despite, the, what do you call it? It's not additives, but the adhesives, the material, the ingredients that they use to basically put those briquettes together. So despite that, he definitely prefers using briquettes over lump. Now, I've been in the lump charcoal camp because I think of it as being more naturally produced without any additions, any additives or anything like that. But he makes some strong points is that, he likes control, and cooking with briquettes, each one is the exact same size. So they're going to basically cook at the same, or they're going to burn at the same rate is the thought. It's the science behind it. And it gives more predictability, and that adds to the control factor that he wants. I think that's also another reason why he likes gas grills. Because again, you just turn that knob and you can set the temperature that you want. So he likes the gas grills with the infrared burners. But yeah, so he's a big proponent for charcoal, which I found for briquettes, which I found to be pretty interesting. Not so sure. I mean, I think I will cook more with briquettes now. Not sure that I'm ready to just go completely all the way with briquettes. I don't know if I'm there yet. I think it's going to probably depend on the cooker. I can see myself really using briquettes like in my Weber Smoky Mountain. It just, I don't know. I don't really have like my thought process completely worked out on that yet, but my intuition tells me that it works, that it just makes sense. So Weber Smoky Mountain, Weber Kettle, I think I'm probably going to be exclusive briquettes moving forward. Drum smokers, even my Weber Summit Kamado, because it burns so efficiently and it's so easy to control temperatures, even when I'm cooking with lump. I kind of see myself leaning more towards lump on those cookers. So, yeah. PK, that's interesting. In the past, on my PK 360, I've always cooked with lump. But now I'm kind of thinking probably be easier to, have better predictability and dial in temperatures if I use briquettes. So that was a pretty good, pretty interesting nugget from Meathead on that one. All right, guys. So we covered a lot. Again, do appreciate you all. So again, if this is the kind of discussion that you like, on a regular basis, definitely invite you to check out the Backyard SmokeMaster Society, which is the membership community that I've created. And we've got some members. Bruce, aka Correctional Officer for Lockdown, is a member. So just go to backyardsmokemaster.com/society to check that out. And there's a QR code if you want to, use your phone to get to it really quickly. So definitely do that. Let's see. Had another comment came in with regard to the Benkotan. So Surfing on Mars says you can order the Japanese charcoal from a shop in New York City. They will ship it to you. And I think he's saying that it's Korin. Is that the name? Maybe that's the name of the shop. Okay. Okay, I do see. Let me bring this up real quick. Okay, so Korin.com. This is why I love you guys. This is the benefit of the community, because I know I don't have all the answers. And there's stuff that, you guys are hearing about that I've never heard of. So Korin, you can order a 33-pound case of this Japanese charcoal for $110. And then there's even a 5-pound option if you just want to try it out, $21.50. And this is probably what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to start off, maybe just ordering a 5-pound bag just so I can check it out a little bit. and that's pretty reasonable. Unfortunately, it does say right now it's out of stock. But if you're really serious, 33 pounds. And I'm looking at the pieces here in the picture. You know, they look like wood splits. You know, so I'm curious, those of you who have experience with it, so it doesn't look like lump charcoal, which, you know, kind of comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. It doesn't look like small uniform little briquettes. Kind of looks like wood splits. Is that normally how it comes? Is that how it normally looks? Oh, it looks like it's out of stock, the 33 pound as well. So I'm, you know, really curious about that. If you guys know the answers to those questions, let's see. So surfing on Mars definitely seems to have some knowledge, has knowledge on it. So thanks for that tip about the corn. There's also South African charcoal too that is known to be popular. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, Surfing on Mars says there are many grades of Binkeltan. It burns very, very hot and leaves very little ash. It glows like the filament of an incandescent bulb. Bought many boxes years ago when my Japanese friends told me the price was about to soar. Smart. All right. And then as far as like the Smoky Mountain, Anoinks agrees that briquettes are perfect for the Weber Smoky Mountain. Okay. Lots of good information, and I probably, if I can, I'm gonna see if I can. I'll probably add myself to that get notified when it's available, because I'm really, really curious about the Binkeltan. All right. So again, thank you guys. Again, check us out, Backyard SmokeMaster Society. Of course, tell your friends about the podcast. We're here every Friday, most every Friday. At this time, Fridays, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, you can also get the replay whenever you're ready on YouTube, or you can get the audio only version on your favorite podcast player. So share the podcast, give the podcast a review, help us get more eyeballs, more ears on the podcast. This is Kenyatta Robinson. I appreciate you all for spending some time with me today. Get out there, enjoy your grills and smokers. We'll be back next Friday, June 13th at 7 p.m. Have a great weekend, and I will see you very soon. Take care, everyone.